Welcome everyone to this Knowledge Café by the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security on UNESCO's Youth as Researchers on COVID-19 initiative. My name is Maria Stay. I work on youth empowerment with the United Nations Development Programme. And before we start, just a few housekeeping rules. This meeting today is being recorded, and the recording will be made publicly available afterwards. Please keep muted if you do not speak. And we would be glad to hear who is with us in the room today. So please feel free to use the chat to connect with one another and introduce yourself with your name, what you're working on, or the organization you are working with, and where you're joining us from. The Knowledge Cafés by the Global Coalition aim to really bring to the fore youth expertise and youth-led recommendations. They also aim to provide greater knowledge on youth, peace and security, and to connect young people with the academic community and with practitioners. And why is this so important? Well, that is because young people have a critical role in building and sustaining peace, but yet too often young people experience exclusion from decision-making processes relating to peace and relating to security, and youth expertise often remain unvalued. So today's session is really an opportunity to reflect on youth participatory research approaches and youth-led recommendations on technology and civic engagement in context of crisis. And we will hear from young researchers on COVID-19. And this initiative we are going to hear about today is an initiative by UNESCO, which connects youth-generated knowledge with policy solutions. And with that, just to say that the program we have today, the agenda we have, is that first we're going to have an introduction to UNESCO's Youth as Researchers initiative. Then we are going to hear from two of the young researchers about technology in context of COVID-19 and also civic engagement in Arab states before going into a section where we'll hear from some of the former Youth as Researchers participants to hear from their experience, including in how to link youth-led research with policy conversations. And then at the end, we will have an open dialogue and look much forward to engaging with all of you on that. So without further ado, let me give the word to Dr. Kayla Thorne, who is a UNESCO consultant and visiting assistant director of the Batten Leadership Institute at Holland's University. Kayla, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be talking, as Maria had mentioned, about the Youth as Researchers program, and I'm so excited to see some familiar faces in our participant list. And share a little bit about this program. I've been working with the Youth Researchers program for about 4 years, and its roots, it began and got started in 2015 with the UNESCO chair out of Ireland in Galway, Dr. Pat Dolan. He worked with Danielle Keenan there, and they were able to develop this program where young people were engaged on social science research. And from there, it jumped over to the US through the UNESCO Chair Program with Dr. Mark Brennan at Penn State University. And that's where myself and a few others here on the call became involved. And we've just blossomed into this magnificent program since then. So the basis of the Youth Researchers program is young people aged 14 to 35, depending on what country and what region you're in, work together in small groups. We go through a very simplified training process on social science research. So by participating in this training, young people are engaged on different research methods in this very participatory capacity. Once that training is complete, they're then participating in this youth-led project where the group of young people are identifying an issue in their community which they wish to address. They go through identifying what research methods that they would like to apply to this particular problem, creating the research question, creating the research instruments, collect the data, it's all primary data, analyze it, and then they share it. And that's a very, very quick nutshell version of this usually 3 to 4 month long program. And the idea behind it is that young people's voice have this opportunity to engage in policy level conversations and community change conversations. As Maria had mentioned, it's an action research project. And so that actionable change at the end, these recommendations are coming from people who are experiencing the great challenges of their community, and will now be able to have hard data to be able to share with those change makers within the community. As I mentioned, the program got started in 2015 and it's branched across Ireland. We'll hear some of those case studies later on. In the past 2 years now, we decided to connect up with other UNESCO partners throughout the world and expand the program and try and address the COVID-19 pandemic and the challenges that young people face with it. It blossomed, and this confirmed for everybody who was working on it that this is a program that young people are interested in. It's a program that has this great potential to help elevate youth voice and create a change in small, very small micro communities, all the way up to national change if it goes about that in the correct way. And so with that, we sent a call out 2 years ago to see who was interested, and we have some of you who saw that call and applied and have been on this journey with us. But we had over 6,000 applicants apply, representing over 90 countries, just in this simple call to try and address young people and the challenges that they were facing with the COVID-19 program. Unfortunately, we weren't able to work with everyone. We pared that down, and we're able to instead have about 33 small groups still representing over 50 countries, and understand what issues young people around the world were facing when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're branching this off into a million different little pieces right now, and one of the groups that we're transitioning to is citizen security and peace building. And I saw Romeral is present, and she helped with the webinar with that just last week. So the topics and the issues that this program can help address are incredible because they're so tailored and so youth-led that that the potential to create actionable change within the community impacted by whatever the challenge is really present, which is an incredible thing to see, because it's something that allows the program to be adapted based on the cultural needs as well as the needs of the young people involved. Before I pass the mic back over, there are two main outcomes that are typically found within the participation of the program. The first one being an interpersonal kind of capacity building within youth participants. And so this program, in order to get through the training, collection of primary data, and analyzation, as well as then sharing and creating actionable change from it, it takes multiple months to get through all of this different work. And you're working with a group of like-minded individuals who, for whatever reason, have decided to join in with your youth researchers group. And so those interpersonal connections and interpersonal growth that happen are things such as an increase in empathy and whatever your challenge might be. It's a connection with different multi-level partners that you're working with, as well as typically multi-generational partners that you're working with. And so you have a lot of capacity building within individuals who participate in the program. And then that translates, which if I take a look around the room present, you'll see a lot of UNDP, UNESCO, USIP, these different programs that everyone's working with. And so if you're a young person going through the Youth Researchers program, you're able to then develop some interpersonal skills and then share those in all the other different avenues, nonprofits, government work that you're participating in, and it spreads like wildfire. The other outcome that comes from this is a chance to really elevate youth voice coming from a youth perspective. And that's going to be more of kind of this methodology idea that comes from the research program. As mentioned, you're going through social science research, you're collecting primary data, and when you're presenting this information to the higher change makers within a community, you're presenting facts. And those facts are really hard to dispute. You can dismiss someone's opinion all day long, but it's really hard to dismiss those facts. And it provides this opportunity for young voice to be heard through youth researchers and then shared with those change makers in a way that policy and change makers are really interested in hearing from. So I think those are my big gist for our Youth Researchers program. I'm so excited to hear the examples that we have today. They're from some of our COVID-19 projects, as well as some of the earlier renditions of the program. And I'm excited to see what that conversation is going to hold in the future. as we really center around citizen security and peace building. As I had mentioned with that program, it's a pilot program coming out of the Caribbean, where groups of young people who are in the midst of their final exams, I give them so much credit, but they're working on analyzing these different angles of citizen issues and challenges within their community. And eventually in the spring, we'll hear direct examples on this exact topic, on ways that these youth have identified barriers, challenges, issues, and then also recommendations based off of that data that they're getting. So I think that's enough rambling from me. Maria, I would love to pass the mic back over to you, and so we can get on to hearing our interesting case studies.
Thank you very much, Kayla, for setting the stage and really introducing the overall initiative. We have our moderator today have joined us, so I'll be giving the words to Grace, who is the co-chair of the Knowledge Management Task Force of the Global Coalition, to moderate the last part of the event today. But also just to say, as Laura have put in the chat, please do share reflections throughout, use the chat, and then we are looking forward to the open dialogue at the end of today's program. Grace, over to you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Kalia, for the detailed introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, and my apologies. To our next discussants, Amar Hadid from Iraq and Tokelo Shire from South Africa. Amar Hadid is from Arab States Youth Civic Action Team and works as a logistician with the Mines Advisor Group. And Tokelo Shai is from South Africa and was working with the Global Use of Technology team. So over to you, Hamar, for the discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, Grace, and it's a great pleasure for me to be with you here today. I'm gonna throw a brief about what I'm going to talk about today. Basically, I have less than 10 minutes of my time. So firstly, I'm gonna speak about the our research and about the Arab teams. Gonna be a short or small brief about the team members and where are they from. And then I'm gonna go through it and continue about some stories from some initiatives and NGOs from the Arab youth. And then I will state some challenges that we are facing in terms of civic action or peace building. And finally, I will speak or I will state where we are as Arab team from peace building. So basically, our research is digital and civic action among young Arab adults in the time of COVID-19. And this was prepared by UNESCO Youth as researchers, Arab Team 1. And the authors or the team members of Arab Team 1 are Rida Krisht from Lebanon, Adil Labidi from Syria, Amani Muhaffaz from Egypt, Fakhri Jayousi from Palestine, Safa Al-Sharif from Sudan, Shema Barakat from Yemen, and Sundus Hamad from Sudan, and finally the speaker Amar Hadid from Iraq. So overview about our research. The Arab states has one of the world's greatest populations of young people, yet they have very limited presence in their governments. The Arab Team 1 and the YAR program wanted to investigate the digital and civic activities that Arab young adults engaged in during the pandemic, as well as the extent to which these activities assisted them in surviving, contributing to change, and creating space for social support and a sense of community. Across sectional and web-based surveys of Arab nationals aged 20 to 35, as well as virtual in-depth interviews with founders of NGOs in digital and civic projects, were focused on our research. Some stories to tell about the youth initiatives in the Arab world. As a part of the research on digital civic and action among young Arab adults, we have conducted in-depth interviews where we have identified founders, organizers, or active people who are volunteering on civic initiatives or NGOs in the Arab community. And we have invited them to participate in in-depth interviews that aim to lift the profile of civic action by young Arab adults, and below are some of the NGOs and their peace building tales. So CEDAW from Iraq used to focus on economic development projects, but they had to shift to their obligations to emergency services in response to COVID-19 pandemic. Also, we have Ilham from Yemen. They established a free digital education platform, targeted the refugees and internally displaced children for the Arab region. We have Food Blessed from Lebanon. They have cooked and prepared 100,000 meals from August 2020 till January 2021. In addition to that, they were cleaning the damaged houses and streets in Beirut at the time of Beirut explosion. And finally, we have Mastura from Egypt. They were working on helping the refugees, asylum seekers who were coming to Egypt to get there settled by issuing their legal papers. Some challenges that we are facing as Arab youth in terms of building, peace building in the Arab regions. There are many challenges that bring the youth Arab back when it comes to peace building. And to be more specific, I would like to mention some of the challenges like pandemic, especially COVID-19, which has amplified the challenges and opportunities facing civility and digitality active Arab young adults. Also wars, like in some Arab countries like Syria, Yemen, and also Iraq when it was invaded by ISIS in 2014. Also, one of the other challenges is disasters. For example, the Beirut explosions that has happened last August 2020. In addition to what I was mentioned, there are many other challenges like corruption in some of the governments, lack of resources, and difficulties of online connectivity that are facing the Arab youth. And finally, I would like to talk about the Arab team and peace building. In addition to our research with the ARB program, the Arab Team 1 is conducting peace building activities by having weekly meetings till now to discuss among the team members the opportunities, ideas, or activities that we may do that may serve the youth goals and in alignment with the UN Sustainable Development, especially Goal 16, which is like the peace, justice, and strong institutions. And also the Arab Team 1 has conducted a consultancy meeting with many NGOs initiatives in the Arab world that discussed and highlighted the role of these initiatives in the Arab region to understand the volunteering in the Arab world and also how to develop it. Thank you so much. If there are no questions, over to Topila.
Great, thanks very much, Amar. I'll just be sharing my screen. I don't know if anyone can confirm if they can see my presentation.
We see it.
Great. Okay, great. So our research was similarly exploring the impacts of COVID-19 on global youth, to be specific. And we were looking at harnessing ICT for global youth response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And our team was made up of a group of young people from across the globe. We had Ariba from Pakistan, Mohammed Hazim, who's joined us today from Iraq, Rafaela from Brazil, and myself, Tukeloshai from South Africa. And I'll just be talking you through a little bit of a background around our research, the methodology we followed, and also some of the key findings and recommendations that are relevant to our discussion today. So as Amar already highlighted, and also Kayla, that our focus on this project was to look into the impacts of COVID-19 among young people. And we specifically explored that from the impacts of digital innovations or technologies and the opportunities those provided for young people to remain resilient in the face of the pandemic, but also specifically to look into the risks that also emerge in utilizing digital technologies. So in light of this, what we intended to do with our research was to explore how global youth perceived COVID-related information, the perception around online security, and also looked into how they responded to the impact of COVID-19 accordingly through the use of technology. So we looked at it specifically in 4 key sectors, mainly due to our interests among the group of young people, the team. And this looked at the agri-food sector, cybersecurity, healthcare, and also digital business. And what we explored was insights around the access and credibility of online related information, the risks of utilizing the internet and online information, and also youth approaches and challenges on the utilization of the internet during COVID. I'll mainly just focus my discussion today around the risks or the findings around the risks of utilizing the internet and online information. Just going into our methodology, so we adopted a quantitative research method in our study, and we circulated a survey to young people aged between 18 and 35 years old. And this was circulated to more than 500 young people from across the globe, mainly representative from us as the team, from Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. And the data that we collected was analyzed using a descriptive and exploratory approach. Then going into some of the findings and giving you a little bit of an overview around the profile of respondents. So a total of 89 young people responded to our survey, and this was made up of 50 females, 24 males, and 1 non-binary. And then in terms of the age group, 58% were aged between 18 and 25, 19% aged between 25 and 30, and 10% were over the age of 30. And then geographically, our respondents mainly came from the Asia Pacific, that made up 31%, and Latin America and the Caribbean, and about 17% from the Arab states. And then looking at the highest level of education from our respondents, majority were at university level, and some at postgraduate level, just 27% of those, and also some from secondary school. Then going into the findings around the risks of utilizing the internet is that part of our focus for this research was recognizing that during the pandemic, there's been quite a strong reliance on the use of the internet and also online tools to remain resilient. I think even most of us that are working or even in school, we had to actually join a lot of online Zooms meetings, and this is still ongoing, but also just realizing that there are also unintended consequences through the use of online information. And this is in the form of the misuse or disinformation and also cyber criminality that results with the ability to access the internet. So what we wanted to understand there was to explore whether young people were, aware of some of these consequences and understand the degree to which they felt safe online. And 67% noted that they feel moderately safe. 19% noted that they don't feel safe at all, and 14% considered themselves safe. And then in terms of understanding the challenges around the use of the challenges around cyber security since the pandemic, we asked young people what challenges they were aware of within their own regions. And some of what came out from the survey was across all the age groups, young people noted that people only care about using the internet without being aware of the consequences. And young people aged between 25 and 30 noted that people are not motivated to read and improve their skills in relation to cybersecurity within their regions. And then youth aged 18 to 25 noted the lack of cybersecurity courses to support youth in response to cyber crimes. Then another part of this research was to explore online information and the increasing amount of misinformation and fake news that was spreading as a result of the pandemic. So we wanted to understand young people, how many of them were receiving fake news in relation to COVID-19 information, and about 70% noted that they always receive fake news, while 21% noted that they sometimes receive fake news. And then in terms of their own behavior, around the pandemic, majority noted that they sometimes look for the sources of information before sharing it, while others always look for the source before sharing it, and others noted that they never actually research. About 13% noted that they always receive, they never actually search for the source before sharing it. And then further to that was understanding their ability to identify whether information is fake news or not. And 7.7% say they always feel safe. They will always feel able to identify disinformation, and about 36% say that they feel able to identify it, and 41% say that they sometimes feel capable. So I guess the key insights I just wanted to highlight here around some of this research was that there's a clear indication of, the limited awareness around the consequences of using online information, and also just the inability of a lot of young people to identify whether information is fake news or not. And with the growing use of online tools and also the risk of cyber criminality, it's going to be quite important that a lot of young people are able to identify whether information is safe and be able to protect their data online, to be able to respond accordingly. So with that, some of our recommendations that we highlighted in relation to this aspect of the research was to encourage technology education and training, specifically looking into courses that support young people's ability to utilize online tools and to further identify those unintended consequences. And this could be in the form of cyber literacy, basic skills on cyber literacy that are in place, and ensure the safety and protection of online information, encouraging critical thinking that allows a lot of young people to be able to differentiate between credible and misinformation. And then lastly, and this recommendation came in part of our discussions at the knowledge sharing event that took place in October. And this was around, the role of government in also further putting a lot of young people at risk of, being susceptible to misinformation. And this was looking into innovative approaches to balance internet freedom versus security, and taking into account some of the monopoly around the use of the internet and spreading of fake news. And so there's a responsibility there around the governance of the cyberspace, and ensuring that a lot of young people are protected and methods are in place. And some of the recommendations here was around the legislation to ensure that users can express themselves safely, ensuring that there's some dialogues that are in place to share best practices, and also recommending greater investment in civil society organizations that are already involved in the space to protect and promote the net neutrality. So that's it from my side. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
I'll hand over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Tokelo and Ama for the presentation. Our next discussion reflects on youth research in policy making. And our presenters are Jack Gaffey and Ella Anderson, who are both researchers and DRR steering committee representatives. So over to you, Jack.
There you go. Thank you very much. My name, as I said, is Jack Gaffey. I'm a youth researcher in the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre in Galway, and I'm a final year student in the National University of Ireland, Galway. So today I'm just going to talk briefly about the usage of youth as researchers in Ireland and its benefits for young people. I think one of the best examples of how youth as researchers has been conducted in Ireland and how it's been later adapted for this kind of global setting that we're now seeing it used in is the Irish focus on youth groups in order to source, youth organizations in order to source our youth groups for youth as research. Ireland has a number of publicly funded and privately funded youth clubs, such as Froiga and Corland and Oak. And these youth groups are given the opportunity to inform the UNESCO Center that they would like to take part in research, youth researchers, and receive the training necessary to take part in the youth as researchers. We can see this contrast from what Kayla was saying before with our COVID global study that UNESCO made a call to receive applications. So we can see there's kind of a difference in how the youth are found in this situation. The significant consequence of this is that we see a huge diversity of young people represented in our Irish Youth as Researchers projects. As these youth groups work with young people from with a wide variety of needs, both in rural and urban settings across Ireland. And we see that reflected in the research that they want to take part in. Typically as well, that these youth groups are rarely past the age, members of these youth groups are rarely past the age of 18. And so our youth members are typically between the ages of 16 to 18 or 14 to 18 in some cases, which is of course very important because when young people, they're below the age of 18, they are not able to vote, and obviously they have no real way of expressing themselves on on a social political scale, apart from taking part in of organizations and directives like this. They're quite often overlooked, and worse yet, they can be legislated on without any kind of insight on their perspectives. So I think you could say with some experience that Ireland can, for young people, can quite often be seen as a bit of an unfriendly place for youth, and Youth as Researchers offers a manner of breaking through into a realm of kind of debate, which they're quite often excluded from, and push against this kind of very stuffy form of academics that quite often tries to kind of pull the ladder up from behind them, or for me, who are interested in improving the position of their own position and their understanding of the world in which they live. To give you some brief examples of what kind of work youth research has done and have conducted in the country, I'd like to point you to youth research conducted by young people in Roscommon, which is my home county. For those of you who don't know, Ireland held a referendum in 2015 on the legalization of gay marriage, and Roscommon was regrettably the only country who voted no. And it was this that inspired youth groups in Roscommon to take part in youth as researchers, and try to research to understand the impact that being a member of the LGBTQ plus community in rural areas such as Roscommon had on mental health and well-being, and then on what recommendations should be made to improve their conditions. Another study I can point you to is one that was conducted through Cortland and No, which focused on youth perceptions of homelessness in Ireland, an issue which has become something of a crisis in recent years in the country. And this research aimed to establish the stereotypes of homelessness in Ireland that were felt by young people and express what actions they could take to help in the situation. I think a final thing to mention about youth researchers in Ireland is the wide variety of products that can be made out of the project. The most recent variant of youth as researchers, the COVID-19 global study, focuses on knowledge products that are more academically focused, research papers, snapshots, policy papers and the like. In Ireland, it's a smaller scale, and the primary audience that we're trying to give our research to is typically young people themselves. And so the knowledge projects that we see made are usually easily digestible and can be easily spread across to young communities. Typically, this would be in the form of kind of short videos and infographics, posters, and the like. All of these can then be shared through the UNESCO Child and Family Research Center's website, its YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, and so on. I think this is particularly important because it gives youth as researchers not only the academic experience which they need and which is what we offer to them and through the training, but it also doesn't stunt their creativity. It doesn't stunt their ability to fully express their youth in the research that they're making, and doesn't confine them to, like as I was saying before, a very stuffy and academic professionalism. And we also, in terms of relating to policymaking, these shorter, very easily digestible pieces can be easily shown to policymakers to really get them up to speed with what the youth have been conducting. In particular, in Ireland, we work quite closely with the Ombudsman for Children, who works outside of the government, but particularly to inform government on policymaking for young people in particular. In any case, I'd like to invite Ella Anderson to discuss briefly her own research project and her experiences with working on the youth as researchers. Thank you.
I think you're muted, Ella.
You're right. Sorry. Thank you for letting me know. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. My name's Ella Anderson, and I am Irish as well as Jack, but I come from a county called Mayo. So Mayo is in the west of Ireland. The reason I mention that is because my research project was regional and conducted within the county of Mayo. So I was a member of a youth group called the TUSLA Mayo Advisory Committee. So TUSLA in Ireland is the branch that encompasses all the child and youth family services for the country. So our job initially was that we would conduct analysis on brochures that were being distributed nationally and within Mayo to see if they were youth friendly and how accessible they were to young people. Upon reviewing these brochures, we felt like brochures weren't very accessible to young people, and most young people wouldn't read brochures anymore, but would rather look online for sources of information. So we wanted to explore and see if it would be better for us to kind of shift from brochures distribution to online sources of information. So our youth worker contacted the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre in NUI Galway about doing the UNESCO Youth as Researchers training. So back in 2017, I conducted with my group a day-long training where we were taught research skills, and we decided to come up with our research question. So what we decided to explore in my county was we decided to look into the issues that young people faced when accessing information related to family services in Ireland, their preferred methods of information access, and also how young people could be made to feel more comfortable when visiting one of these services, because when you initially go into a family service, you can feel very anxious. And we wanted to make the transition to using these services more accessible. So what we decided to do was we decided to use multiple sources of information because mixing both quantitative and qualitative results we felt would be more robust. So what we did was we conducted a survey. So the survey was conducted just in the county where I'm from, and we had nearly 250 participants. The reason we had such a high response rate with the survey was because when we disseminated the surveys to the schools across Ireland, we included envelopes that were stamped and addressed. So anyone who completed the survey could just put the survey in and send them straight back to us. We also conducted 6 focus groups across the country over a number of different schools to get a countrywide view on what young people would like changed about family services in order to be made more comfortable. Just an example of a couple of results was that we found that only 35% of young people actually knew what TUSLA was, and that access to information was would be preferred to come from a trusted adult, which was contrary to what we initially thought, because we thought online information would have been the #1 source of access. But it turns out young people in Mayo preferred it to come from a trusted adult. So to showcase our findings, what we did was we created a research video that showcased the results of the survey, and we also condensed the findings down to 8 key messages for social workers and youth workers to have 8 key messages that they could follow so that they knew how to make a young person feel more comfortable when using their service. To showcase the information, we actually held a conference in a town called Kilchma in Ireland. So we organized our own conference and we invited youth workers from around Mayo, and also had national national members like the Ombudsman for Children, Jack mentioned, and the leader of the youth organization for Ireland called Feroga attend the conference in Mayo. So the conference was full of workers and researchers from around the country. And what we did was we had multiple different tables, and each table was moderated by a young person who was on the committee. And we showcased ways that young people could find meetings more interesting. So we'd created these kind of games and more engaging ways to talk with young people and showcase them to the youth workers and the social workers who attended. We also had all the speakers at the conference were young people, and we showcased the video and the 8 key messages. So to this day, the 8 key messages is actually still being distributed by TUSLA within Mayo, and also it's being showcased at national conferences in Ireland every year. So the research is still being it's still being distributed, and the 8 key messages are still being shared. It's also been showing at schools, and it's the fact that it's still been shown today shows how important it was to show how to make young people more comfortable in Ireland. And it's still informing policy as of right now. So it's the youth workers in Mayo still have them on the wall. And we actually visited back at the Mayo Youth Office, and they had taken all of our advice into consideration and redesigned the office in order to make it youth friendly. So it's great to see our research being brought to life with places making areas more youth accessible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ella, for the presentation. I would like to, before I hand over to Laura, I would like to thank all our presenters for giving us a great overview of your research, both in peace building amidst challenges of COVID-19 and governance and bad governance issues, on access to internet, both as a place for opportunities, but also a place for new challenges in South Africa. The youth efforts in breaking barriers and informing policy making on various thematic areas that focus on inclusion in Ireland, and also the engagement of young people, and also sharing their voice in regarding to perceptions on the services being provided. So thank you so much. I would like to hand over to Laura to take us through the question and answer. Please, if you have any questions, like mentioned, just type in our chat. And also I think there was also a comment in the chat of people requesting for presentations, and Laura also already shared some links. So over to you, Laura.
Great, thank you, Grace. I think my video is on now. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura. Good to see you all. I am an individual specialist for the UNESCO Youth Program, and very happy to be here today. Like Grace, I also want to thank our presenters for such a great discussion so far, for the intro to YAR, this conversation within relating it to youth, peace, and security, the presentations about some current YAR projects, but also some previous ones. So now we do want to open it up to a discussion with the audience. I think we have some members from the Global Coalition doing some relevant work here, maybe some colleagues from the Life and Peace Institute who are doing youth participatory research, the Southern African Development Youth Council, the United Network of Young Peace Builders, YAR participants, and much more. So welcome to everyone. Now's the time for open dialogue, for you to take the floor, to hear your voices. So feel free to jump in, share your perspectives, questions you have for our speakers, or how your experiences relate to this global work. And I think we have some things coming in the chat already. So a question from Gita. Gita is wondering if there are any grants or pilot programs that bring young adults together who are active. Does anybody know from your personal experience if there are any such? Or advice of maybe where to look?
I'll take that one, Laura. Hi, Gita. Excuse me. The quickest answer to that, I know within the Youth Researchers Program, that is a piece of our future that we're actively interested in. It was actually a piece identified from our Youth Steering Committee very early on, and the puzzle pieces are slowly being worked together. But there's interest from our specific program in developing the opportunity for small grants to exist for active groups within Youth as Researchers, as well as other similar active groups in order to continue with that research. So I think that's something that might be coming from our particular organization in the next year or so. Unfortunately, bureaucracy does not move quickly. So I know it'll take a little bit of time for that, but that's one from our immediate program. Otherwise, I've seen them in the smaller scales, either very specific, depending on what your topical area of interest is, or perhaps regional. I think actually Ella didn't reference any grants, but I think that the conversation of really centering in on the county that she was working in and the issues on this particular topic would be a way to look. So I don't remember offhand what your group was focused on, but you had an amazing response to your study specifically. And so I think there's potential to really garner and gain interest on either the topic or maybe within a specific area. With your study in particular, I think it's also one that there's pros and cons because you involved so many different regions and areas that is something to be mindful of. You might get more interest with that, or you might need to tailor it down. And I think Maria has her hand raised as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Thank you. And how interesting to hear all the presentations. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I just had another question following the presentations. I think one of the key areas that we have heard is really how also the experience from Ireland and the previous versions of the Youth as Researchers initiative have really been able to bridge the lived experience of young people with the policy dialogues, with the academic community. And I was wondering if Amar and Tequila could share a little bit about how, while conducting the research, what have you felt the importance of being a young person working together with other young people to actually conduct this research? What have that meant for the accessibility and the inclusivity of the research? So a question for you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tequila. Yes.
Great, thanks. Thanks for the question, Maria. I think what has been quite interesting for us is that because we are a group of young people from different countries with different experiences and worldviews, and also with different age groups, I think the diversity of the team did add quite a lot of value to the research in terms of us honing in on each of our different experiences in terms of our youth experiences in our own country. So I think, if anything, it does provide a wealth of knowledge on an individual level, but also for the research itself, but also acknowledging that there is that level of complexity as well that comes with working in a diverse setting, that there's going to be a lot of disagreements, and also you have to now get to a level of decision making as to what becomes critical on a much more, or creating that global narrative that is now shifting away from our own individual, like too much on our own individual experiences, but also hones in on what's the core message at a global level. So I think those are like just the two sides of it in conducting the research. Thanks.
Very well said. Amar, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yes, thank you so much. I would like to say thank you for the question. It's really touchy question, and like it reminds us of like since the first time when we put the efforts on it. So first of all, when we have done the interviews and when we gathered the information from the surveyors, I felt like we as a volunteers and researchers at the same time, like we belong to these NGOs, and we are one of these societies, and also we are one of these young people. So we felt that we are more connected. And also, I would like to mention about that the team, as Arab team, we were all involved in every stage of the research. Like, for example, like stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So every team member is involved. It's not separated. So we all were sharing the experience. We all working together. We all like had the team spirit. So as a teamwork is what was great working with my team. So this was my experience with that.
It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I think, Tequila, we had another question for you in the chat from Grace. She wanted to thank you for the great overview on the pros and cons for access to technology. And would you say there are any significant differences in access to internet among youth and urban or rural areas from your findings?
Thank you for the question, Grace. Our research did not explore that differentiation between urban rural youth. If anything, what we can only tell is at a geographical level in terms of developing versus developed states. So that's some of the few insights that we're gathering around that level of differentiation, but we did not explore it on a rural-urban basis. But also, I think just to add that, there was a strong sentiment across in terms of the digital divide, that a lot of young people noted that the challenge in terms of online access was around limited infrastructure and also around the costs of accessing data connectivity, internet connectivity. So that came out strongly across all the regions. So I think, if anything, that's one of the key findings that we came across, that regardless of whatever sector a young person was operating in, there was that limitation in terms of access. And that came in terms of infrastructure costs, but also, I think, as mentioned already, that there is that monopoly around internet usage that does also play a part in the limitations around your connectivity. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. The next question we have is from Paul, and I think it's past and present based. So I think this might be an opportunity to bring in Jack and Ella as well, in addition to Amar and Tequila. So the question is, can you share about how you have engaged or plan to engage key stakeholders nationally, internationally, with the outcomes or the research products? For example, what strategies have you found to get policy stakeholders to be more receptive to youth research? Any thoughts here, especially since our current researchers are going into a YAR policy conference?
Hi, Laura. I can jump in here for this one, if that's okay.
Yes.
Hi. So I know with my project in particular, how with our findings, so because we were already linked with the Child and Family Services in Ireland to the Tusla Mayo branch, that we were very lucky that we already had a way to disseminate it to the relevant people. We found particularly that the conference that we held that conferences are a fantastic way in general to get the information out there, because with the conferences, so we were able to showcase all the information, we were able to have youth speakers, so we were able to make it very youth orientated. But with sorry, I'm trying to find the question just so I can make sure I can answer it very particularly. But what we found, you see, my group was very lucky that we were able to get policy stakeholders due to the nature of the project. So due to the fact that we were informing the branch that we were already in. I do know as Laura mentioned there, that the UNESCO Global Project, we will be having a policy conference in January. So that's going to be a fantastic way to showcase global policymakers the importance of the youth research and ways that they can implement it in order to make policy more youth friendly?
Yeah, and just to jump in there, I think on conferences, apologies, my camera is no longer working, it appears. The UNESCO Child and Family Research Center itself hosts a conference annually in July or June, I believe. And there as well, I mean, that's a time when there's a huge amount of relevant stakeholders present, and youth as researchers, their knowledge products always kind of take a fore in being presented. There's been an active effort in making sure that those videos that I was discussing previously are always kind of shown and linked to, and also made widely accessible. Their findings can be used to inform further research and literature reviews and future work.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts there?
A quick comment as I was getting ready to type it into the chat. I would also say the nature of collecting data from your community, by your community, and engaging key stakeholders within it. While those individuals might not be explicitly at the policy level, they are groups that engage in those conversations. And so that helps build momentum, exposure, and essentially networking as well. And I think that helps create this connection and link to those policymakers. I also think that it's something that is strategically done when developing the projects and seeing what networks can exist through components such as this knowledge cafe here, where you're able to really connect to different movers and shakers in their respective areas, and ultimately just keep gaining momentum around a topic. And that along with the different sources and products coming from research also helps to engage policymakers.
Yes, definitely. So just to be respectful of everybody's time, we're just about done, but we have one more question from Gladys in the chat for Tokilo. How do you help youth feel comfortable and courageous to share experience in the virtual environment?
Well, that's a tricky one, mainly because I think, we're all very different, and it's very tricky to put a one-size-fits-all response to that. But I think for myself, I find that, often being able to share is realizing the benefits of it when you are able to circulate or share your experience in a virtual environment. And part of that is noting that, there's that network generation that Kyla just referred to, where you are able to actually share your results and see what that results or informs as a result of you being able to present some of your research, or bringing your voice rather, right? So I think if anything is recognizing the importance of the voice you bring to the table, and then looking at how that could potentially spread. It becomes tricky, I think, in situations where you don't have access to that virtual environment for you to be able to share. But I think even if it's, I think Maria shared that there was an online discussion platform, so something like, WhatsApp conversations, where if you can still tap into those, where it's much more accessible now with a greater use of smartphones. So I think if anything, there's opportunities to share, but at the same time is recognizing for you to be able to feel comfortable and courageous, it's the ability to recognize what your voice could do, and not everyone is actually aware of that. But I think if anything, there are different ways to do so, where it does not have to be limited to a virtual environment. If you're comfortable writing social media and using your voice through such platforms, and that's also a platform for you to tap into. So it's a tricky one, but I think there's definitely avenues to help young people feel comfortable. But definitely as a young person myself, I think virtual environments and people able to actually articulate how you're presenting yourself is where you are able to actually get the best way to get your voice through. But I would also prefer in person over virtual, if I'm to add that. Thanks.
Very well said, and a wonderful way to end our discussion here today. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to GCYPS for sharing your space with YAR today for this wonderful Knowledge Cafe. And I'll hand it back to Maria and Grace if you want to say any final words.
Just very briefly, a huge thanks to everyone for joining today. And it's been really great to connect with the Youth as Researchers program here. There are so many of the methodology and the points made in that regard that just connect so much about the really youth participatory research approaches often highlighted as needed for youth, peace and security. And then with many thanks to Amar and to Kilo for sharing some very relevant insights from some very new research. Thanks everyone. Please keep in touch, and I'm just going to share a link to the youth4peace.info platform where you can read more about both the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, but also youth, peace and security in general. So just thanks from our side as well.
Thank you so much.